Hi, everyone. We are super excited to be here with all of you today. If you just joined us, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. Tell us where you are. This is our first webinar of 2022, so very excited. And just to give you a bit more info about our webinar and workshop series. So as Conservation Optimism, we started doing these webinars and workshops last year. And so this year, our plan is to have 10 webinars throughout the year. And then we will have workshops every other month, but our workshops are specifically for our Conservation Now members. So if you're interested in becoming a member of Conservation Optimism Network, Iona will put the link in the chat so that you can register and see the online form and get more information. But it's really easy to join, and then once you're in, you get access to the workshops, you get access to our brand new mentoring program, which is about to start, and you also get regular updates from other members. So we have about 50 organizations from all around the globe so far. So it's quite an exciting network to be a part of. And then you get to get on the spotlight as well, like Reserva today, who is one of our new members. So that's super exciting. And so today it's all about youth and youth governance, and we're really excited to have on board with us Callie, Alex, and Joe. And Callie, as you're here, I'll leave you, do a bit more of an intro. I know that you said you would introduce Alex and Joe, so I won't say too much. But I know that there's been a lot of exciting things happening in terms of Reserva and what you've achieved so far, especially with the world's first entirely youth-funded nature reserve in Ecuador. So I can't wait to hear from all of you, and I'll just pass it on to you now, and let's get this webinar started.
Thanks so much. Hi, I'm Callie Broadus, and I'm from the US. And I'm calling from my car today because I'm currently taking a wilderness medicine class that I've dipped out of. I'm gonna have to go back in, so unfortunately I'm gonna have to head back out in a minute. But I wanted to say hi, introduce myself, and then introduce Joe and Alex, who will actually share more about Reserva in detail. But just a little bit of background on what this organization is. I founded this organization 2.5 years ago with support from my co-founder, Bella Lack, and about 10 or 15 young people who were mainly in the UK and a little bit all around the world 2.5 years ago. And since then, we've grown to be about 60 youth from 20 some countries. And now 2 part-time staff members, and we work in conservation and bringing youth into biodiversity conservation solutions, basically. So what the organization does is we work to empower young people to take direct action for threatened species and habitats. We work through 3 impact areas: conservation directly. So as Julia said, we created the world's first entirely youth-funded nature reserve. We work through storytelling. So we go to these places where we work. We collect really powerful storytelling assets like photos, videos, things like that. And then we work through education to get younger people especially into our work, and then to share awareness about biodiversity and what it means for those who don't actually know, which is a shocking number of people, or shocking size of the community of people who don't know that we have a biodiversity crisis on our hands. And then we try to use storytelling to inspire people to take further action at conventions like at the UN, where we were in Glasgow. So the idea for Reserva started around a single project. The idea was to create the world's first entirely youth-funded nature reserve. And Joe and Alex will talk more about that. But I just want to share why I felt it was important to do this and for this group to exist. Thinking about over the last 5 or so years, we've seen a huge rise in youth activism, largely out of frustration at the inaction by leaders to actually do something or do enough about the challenges we're facing with the climate crisis, and to a lesser extent, the biodiversity crisis. And I felt like there was a lot of energy and a lot of opportunity growing to share your thoughts and feelings through activism, through your voice, but there weren't as many opportunities for young people to actually use solutions to contribute toward the solutions to massive international problems like the scale that we see of biodiversity loss. I was working at National Geographic Kids at the time, and I had just been asked to join the advisory council for a conservation group called Rainforest Trust, and they work to protect key biodiversity areas around the world. And it dawned on me that there wasn't a lot of outreach from these big conservation organizations like Rainforest Trust, World Land Trust, Nature Conservancy, to young people in a way that asked youth to help creating these areas. I felt like most of the time young people are treated like, well, you don't really have money, so we're not going to reach out to you like donors. Our outreach is going to consist of maybe some education stuff, like you can learn more and maybe do something later. And I don't think that's fair. I think that there's young people have a huge financial power. Half the world is under the age of 31. So to think that we shouldn't be having a platform where young people can directly contribute to conserving areas that are being lost rapidly, I just felt like it was a huge missed opportunity. And then speaking to Bella, and then bit by bit to everyone who's joined our youth council, I realized that message was really resonating with a lot of people, that yes, we want to be angry, we want to march, we want to use our voice, speak up to politicians and share the changes that we want to see happen in the long term. But in the short term, we also want to do something that actually helps. And so conservation of key biodiversity areas is one of the things that does the most good for both the climate crisis and the biodiversity crisis. So if you're less familiar with the biodiversity crisis, which I would think everyone on here probably is, we're losing species at about 1,000 times the natural rate of extinction. And the best way we can combat that is by preserving native habitat. You probably all know about 30 by 30, the idea that we need to conserve at least 30% of our planet by 2030 in order to make a balanced Earth for us to live on. That's a benchmark toward half Earth, that we need to, the idea that we need to have half of its Earth in its natural state. And that's more than we have now, which means that we're going to need to do tree planting efforts and afforestation or reforestation to get nature back to where it was. But we have to stop the bleeding. And I'm smirking because I literally just left a wound management class where the instructor was like gushing blood out of or fake blood out of a syringe. But we have to stop the bleeding, so to speak. We are losing so much habitat at such a rapid pace that I don't think it makes any sense to leave young people out of direct action in stopping that from happening. So Joe and Alex are both members of our youth council, which is the group that really steers everything we do at Reserva. We believe really strongly that young people not only should be able to contribute to creating protected areas, but they should also decide where those areas need to be. They should be able to be involved in the decision-making process, in the governance of the organization, in learning how to manage the funds that are being raised to go to those solutions, those protected areas, and it really be integrated into every step of the decision-making process. Because as we move forward, the next decades are going to be very challenging, and it's really important that this generation is equipped to be conservation leaders in every aspect that entails. So Joe will probably tell you about our board of directors, things that we've done to make sure that young people are not only engaged, but represented, and really calling the shots with the organization. And I hope that you'll have some questions for them, because they know quite a lot. And this is about as grassrootsy and hands-on as it gets. So, and then if you have any interest in joining what we're doing, we started out quite small about 2 years ago, and we are just now starting to feel like we have the capacity to expand. So Joe will probably speak about this, but we're going to be inviting people to team up with us and be members of our network here pretty soon. So please stay tuned. I'm so sorry that I have to go back to class. We go on these expeditions to this site where we work, and I'm the most medically trained person there somehow. So I need to go make sure that I stay medically trained. But good luck to Joe and Alex speaking. Thank you to everyone who's on this call. If you want to reach me, I'm so sorry I can't stay for questions, but my Instagram handle is @CallieBroadus. Joe can put that and my email in the chat, and of course reach out to Joe and Alex and they can put you in touch.
Oh yeah, so I'm going to try not to sort of go over anything that Callie said. Just really want to show you in picture form, for those who are very visual learners like I am, that it's easier to see things laid out like this. But yeah, as Callie said, we're Reserva, the Youth Land Trust, and we empower young people to make a measurable difference for threatened species and habitats through conservation, education, and storytelling. I feel like I say that in my sleep so many times. I type it out and say it in so many presentations. It's going to be on my tombstone somewhere when I go. But yeah, so that's basically our whole mission statement, and everything we do and everything you'll see in the coming 20 minutes will all relate back to this statement. You know, we're very keen on being very direct with what we do and very meaningful in the way we approach everything. So in this presentation, I'm going to try and give you a very quick overview, but I'm really keen to more get to the questions, and so you can ask us what you want to know about this organization, because I'm sure there's a lot of questions about how we go about empowering youth in this way. But just a quick overview. You know, as Callie mentioned, our primary focus is biodiversity loss. That is first and foremost what we focus on. You know, we care about climate change and land degradation, but our primary focus is on biodiversity. Very much the nature focus. So I'm sure in a group called Conservation Optimism, we're in a good company here with people who share our thoughts. But yeah, and I think what we're most well known for, or what we're most proud of so far, is our flagship project, which was creating the world's first entirely youth-funded nature reserve, which was up here. I don't know if you can see my cursor, but it was right on the Colombian border in Ecuador. It was in Ecuador, right next to the Colombian border, I should say. And this actually is the river that separates Ecuador and then Colombia. It is just on the side of the picture here. It's an incredible site. There's a couple of pictures that I'm going to show you now, and it's a 244-acre site in pristine primary cloud forest. You know, I think it's in the Choco cloud forest. This is an incredible ecosystem, and I think only about 2% of that ecosystem remains from what was about 100 years ago, but don't quite quote me on that. But it's a very threatened habitat, and it's also a key biodiversity area, because the richness and biodiversity in this is insane. You know, every time our team goes on expedition, we're finding new species or new populations of species that were thought to only exist in one area. And every so often we get a little text from our team on the ground being like, I've just discovered a new species of orchid, or I've just discovered a new species of frog. So this place is incredible. And to think that young people 26 and under from around the world have contributed to protecting it is it's an incredible feeling that I'm very proud of. And I'm sure Alex will agree that it's something as young people we really find empowering and very inspiring. This inspired us to continue on the rest of our journeys as environmentalists. But I can't come on here and not show you some pictures of the incredible biodiversity on this site. I'll confess, and Julia knows this, that I'm a marine lover, so I'm not even going to pretend to know all these terrestrial species. But you know, these are some incredible. This is one of the Dracula orchids that the site is named after. This is one of my favorite animals. It just looks so grumpy. all the time. It's a rainbow columni. It's just incredible. You know, we've got mammals, it's got birds. It's just an incredible sight that I'm always blown away by. You know, we've got these sorts of ones. Again, I'm not even going to try and embarrass myself by naming them. If you remember them, please let me know. Yeah, we've got everything on this site. It really is just an incredible site. And this snake is just the cutest snake in the world. And I'll confess that I used to be quite scared of snakes, and I don't know how I was ever scared of this face. We got mushrooms and the fungus on the side here that one of our team members actually discovered on the site, which was another incredible discovery. Birds, all of these, just amazing colors. Frogs again. I think the frogs are what this site is known for. It's incredible. The amount of endemic species that are found here is just unbelievable. But as you know, Carly sort of addressed, it is a very threatened ecosystem. Currently threatened by the spread of agriculture, but more under threat from mining activities. And I'm sure a lot of you here have kept up to date, you know, with the sort of Ecuadorian rights of nature cases. This site is located just on the boundary of where that constitutional fight is going on. So we're really at the forefront of this golden copper mining is the majority. And it's a really interesting situation of land can be protected, but the stuff underneath might not be protected. And it's quite a mess, which is why it's really important that we go about protecting this land, getting it purchased and getting it legally protected, because the legal systems in many countries don't adequately protect them. But obviously, you know, we are Reserva, the Youth Land Trust. We're an international organization, and we don't actually purchase the land ourselves. We work with in-country partners who then purchase the land and own it. Just, you know, there's very valid issues of sort of fortress conservation and international organizations going in and purchasing land when not really communicating with the local communities, which is why we always partner with local on the ground partners who know the communities and know the sort of needs and the sort of threats that they're under, then, shall we say, and how to communicate them to them. But I really just wanted to share this video with you from Javier Raballo, who is the director of our partner. And he says it a lot better than I could ever about why it's so important that we engage youth in conservation and you know, really meaningfully engage youth in conservation. And I'm hoping the sound will come through, but Alex, again, if you can give me a nod, if it's come through, then that would be great.
My name is Javier Roballo. I'm working in Ecominga Foundation, and I'm in charge of the Reserva project and Dracula Reserve. One of the new projects that we have is to involve young people, considering that the next generation needs to be involved from the very beginning of these type of projects to have a long-term impact. We cannot transmit ideas and knowledge and concepts if we are working alone. We need to work with all the different partners that we have, and young people, it's in a different stage. They are not waiting, they are taking actions, and this is the moment, and this is a place to have young people that wants to be scientists, young people that wants to make their own effort, people that wants that her voice must to be felt outside. We cannot go to big meetings and say that we want to involve young people if we don't give the chance. Now is the moment. We don't have time to make mistakes, and young people will provide us 20 years more of actions. And next generation need to be in charge to the next generation also. That's the moment.
Yeah.
My name is...
Every time I watch that, I do get a little bit emotional, and I know Julia's seen that before, so hopefully, Julia, it's just as emotional now as when you first saw it. But Javier is a prime example of someone who really cares about getting young people involved in all aspects of conservation, whether that's research, fundraising, on the ground. You know, he's so passionate about that, and that's why we're so lucky to have him as a partner. And as we expand, we really hope that that's a continued relationship, and also we find other partners around the world who can work with us on projects like that. And it's that really passion for meaningful youth empowerment is what we're so we look for, and that's what means a lot to us. I just want to, all of this work that Reserva does wouldn't be possible with the in-country team who are actually on the ground, protecting the land, doing the scientific surveys. This team is truly incredible, and we owe a lot to them, and they quite often don't get the respect that they deserve, or the media that they deserve, when really these are the people who are out there protecting the land as we speak, in many cases. So really want to shout out to this team. I'm sorry, my screen is frozen. Here's some of our team. In the front row is mostly our Reserva Youth Council. On expedition, this is where they were going actually to find all these new species. I think on this trip, they were there for a month, and there's possibly 12 new species of varying groups that they found, orchids, frogs. Like I said, it's just incredible. And it's young people who are actually going out and finding these species. So it's not only just young people being there as support. These are actually young scientists going out, doing the studies, doing the research proposals, doing the grant proposals. It's all about how can we get young people embedded in every step of the process. So it's not just young people as decoration, it's young people are an integral component of all aspects of Reserva's work. So yeah, these are on expeditions. I'm yet to go. I'm a little bit jealous, but maybe one day I will get to go. And then next we have, this community. From speaking to Javier, a lot of the community, aren't always aware of the biodiversity in their area, or they're not, there's lots of different issues. And one of them is many people in the community are terrified of snakes because there's some very venomous snakes in this area. So Natalia here, one of our youth council members, was actually part of a project to try and, sort of introduce them to members of the snake family that aren't that scary. And but it's a long process. Community engagement is something we're very passionate about, but it's a long process that doesn't happen overnight. Something else we're passionate about is making science accessible. So for those of you who haven't followed us, last year we did a naming competition for one of the new species that we found, where we asked anybody under the age of 26 to just submit an idea for a name of a new species. And we created loads of little education resources. We created little videos. We had a judging panel. And I think, as it says, we had 622 entries from 36 countries, having the first chance to name a species. And naming a species is normally something that's left to in honor of donors, or it's left to the researchers, but we were offered the opportunity to name a new species, and lots of young people got involved and then have stayed involved and said that it's really been an inspiration for them to keep going. The name that won was Hylocertus conscientia, which was named by an Ecuadorian, and it's sort of a play on words about hope and being conscientious of the future. So it was a really beautiful name. We do our Million Letters campaign, which is all about, when we say youth funded, we realize that not young people all around the world don't have equal opportunity to donate and don't have equal resources to actually give money. So this was sort of our campaign to collect letters, and every letter we receive is matched with $3 towards conservation, or about enough to save a classroom-sized area of cloud forest. So it's trying to bridge the gap and trying to open up conservation fundraising to those who, beyond those who just have money to donate. And when we say letters, we also accept videos, pictures, drawings, whatever really, in any language. And they're more than welcome to donate, to send them via email, to send them via Instagram, by post, whatever works for them. It's just trying to open conservation up to a wider audience than it already has been. And a little bit of nitty gritty before we sort of go into some questions. And this is where I really enjoy. This is the sort of governance side of things. Probably not as exciting as all the pictures you've just seen. But when Cali started our organization, this is something that we're also very keen on, is how do we best come together to actually make a difference overall? And quite often people identify a problem and try straight to go to create a charity, but there's all these steps that are really important. That's maybe a better way of spending energy, or a better way of putting your efforts in. And so it's, feel free to take a picture of this if anybody's at that stage in their journey. They've got an idea that they're not quite sure what to do with. Some of this is quite US focused, but it's applicable across the board. It's that, how can you use your time to make the most impact, whilst also being aware of limitations and your well-being and stuff like that. So this is quite a good starting point and a good flow diagram for how to start an organization, or at least the steps and the process of starting. As you'll see, we love Lucidchart. We love a good graph, but this is basically our structure, and you can see it all relates back to our mission statement of conservation, education, and storytelling. And right here is our goal of youth-funded reserves, which is what I've spoken about most, but we also have conventions, which is what I focus on more, taking these letters to world leaders and having their voices heard at these international stage. So we delivered 1,500 letters from young people at COP26 in these really nice little packs, and a lot of the world leaders that we managed to hand them to just said it was just nice to have something that wasn't a petition or wasn't policy focused. It was just generally the voices of young people coming to them, not literally, but coming at them and saying, like, this is why I care about nature and this is why I want to see it protected. And we found that to be a very powerful tool in trying to convince them to take action. And then I think I'm going to hand over to Alex so that you have a different voice for a little bit, just to talk about the structure in detail. And then we'll probably open up for any questions that people may have. So Alex, I'll hand over to you.
Great, cheers, Joe. Yeah, I'm just going to run over briefly how we're organised as a collective, because we're kind of a layered organisation and actually still considering how we might be able to expand, since we've gained so much interest in the short amount of time that we've been an organisation. So right at the top, or the core, we might say, is our board of directors. It's a much smaller group of individuals than our youth council, but we still wanted to make sure that it maintains that kind of youth-led aspect. And as a result of that, we make sure that 30 to 50% of our board of directors, are within that youth categorization, which we've said is 18 to 26. And I suppose more broadly, we try and kind of maintain a really good level of diversity across both our board of directors and particularly our youth council, since we plan to kind of create reserves all over the world. So if we go on to our youth council slide, Joe. So I think, as Callie kind of touched on, we've only been an organisation for a very relatively short period of time. But since then, the number of people in our youth council has dramatically and rapidly increased. So I think I must have joined sometime during lockdown here in the UK, which will have been maybe around May 2020, 2021, I can't remember now. But when I joined, it was only about 20 people, and already it's up to 65, maybe even more now. And what's been equally nice to see is that we were predominantly, as Callie mentioned, British and American. But now we've got Bilal in the chat just as a perfect example today, ranging right over to places like Pakistan. And of course, we've got places on the ground as well. So yeah, I saw you going on to that committee slide there, Joe. Within our youth council, we're kind of separated into different committees, and that's kind of how we organize our activity. And as you can see along the bottom there's a number of different committees, each with between 2 and 4 kind of officers, is what we call them. So I'm a media officer, for example. And what we do is we lead kind of semi-regular meetings to discuss our activity, our aims, but more broadly, just kind of brainstorming. So for media, that's going to be how we can promote our fundraisers, things like that. I mean, just doing a webinar like this at Conservation Optimism, it's clearly appreciated how important media is. But then right through to things like conventions, which Joe is an integral part of, that's getting us to places like COP26, where we can hand out those million letters, which in itself is organised by the Outreach Committee. So we've all got different areas of focus, but hopefully it illustrated just a little bit there that we're all kind of interlinked, because we're all doing these activities with the shared goal. And we constantly have people joining these committees and kind of switching activities between the two. And one thing that I found when I first joined Reserva was it's exciting how many different opportunities you can get involved in. Of course, being part of an NGO, you might think that it's all just fundraising. But I mean, even just with the Community Wellbeing Committee, we've got people working on the ground with our communities that are reserves. So there's really broad scope for kind of getting involved and contributing in whichever way you see fit. Yeah, and just to finish, really, we love everyone's help, particularly established groups like yourself. So hopefully you're following us already, but if not, then Reserva YLT is our tag. And you'll see a lot of our media activity on there, of course. And that's things like Reserva Youth Lives are quite an interesting thing we do, where we have maybe 2 youth council members talking, or sometimes we branch out and speak to people from other organizations. But they're kind of live fundraisers to give you just a more focused idea of kind of one small piece of work that we've been doing or that we've been up to. Then we also do things like our 1 million letters campaign, which Joe spoke about. So on joining the Reserva Youth Council or just supporting us in our work, we love people to contribute 1 letter where they are selling how much they love nature and why it's so important to us as a whole. So that's one of our things that we do. And yeah, basically give us a follow, and also check out our website where we have field notes from our expeditions, which, I mean, as Joe illustrated quite nicely, are always pretty exciting to read, with unexplored territories and species new to science. So there's a lot on our website, and particularly we're active on Instagram if you want to check us out a bit more.
Great, thanks. I think that's pretty much everything. The only thing I did forget to add, because I wasn't aware I was going to be doing this until earlier today, is that we are now looking, as Callie mentioned, to expand our network to be able to empower a greater number of young people. So as Alex said, the best thing to do is to follow us. I'm not just trying to plug our social media, but it's the best thing to do because we'll post all the updates there. So if anybody here is under the age of 26 or has anybody in their networks that think might want to get involved in something like this, do direct them that way, and we'll be sharing everything as it comes out. But yeah, I forgot to add a little slide on that, but really exciting because we really want as many young people as possible to be part of this journey, to empower young people in conservation so they're more than just a voice. But yeah, ask us anything, and I'll stop sharing now so I can see everybody's faces.